We will continue to add every year to the debt burden of future generations. We'll steal today from the future, squeezing out the savings and investments that could increase our future wealth if we don't do something about stopping the size of these deficits, even if we don't balance the budget, if we don't make a remarkable change in the debt accumulated. Anyway, every tax dollar collected in the last year or so, 29 cents, I believe, was the number he gave, or 26 cents, goes just to pay interest on the debt. I'm sure someone has looked out over the next 15 years and concluded if we stay on the track, even the one predicted by the President of the United States, that we will be providing for an increasingly larger share of every tax dollar just to go to reduce interest on the debt. And to me, the beginning, middle, and end is not whether there's a magic about having a balanced budget amendment. It's about that increasingly larger proportion of the tax dollars collected going for the most useless investment of paying interest on the debt. When I introduced the budget freeze years ago, the liberals in my party said, "It's an awful thing you're doing, Joe. You are all the programs we care about, you're freezing them. Money for the blind, the disabled, education, and so on." And my argument then is the one I make now, which is the strongest, most compelling reason to be for this amendment or an amendment, and that is that if we don't do that, all the things I care most about are going to be gone. Gone. So what have we had? We end up with essentially a net reduction in the programs that I cared about over the last 10 years, a net increase in other programs, and a net increase in the portion of the budget that goes to pay interest on the debt. So we'll continue to tie our hands in our ability, indeed our responsibility, to set national priorities in our annual budget process because of the interest on the debt required to be paid every year. This year, the interest on the national debt will cost us $235 billion. The entire discretionary budget will be $253 billion. Let me translate. That's everything from the FBI to education, from help for the mentally retarded to the Library of Congress. That's everything that people think is the place where we're wasting money, that people think is the place we can cut to cut the deficit. Doesn't include Social Security. It does not include it doesn't include entitlement programs. It doesn't include interest on the debt. The point is, it's all those things that everybody, when I go home, says, "Joe, if you just cut the waste in government, if we shut down every department in the government, we would in effect have an inability to balance the budget in the out years, because we're already talking about interest on the debt equaling almost the same amount of money of all the money we spend on the government for what the average person thinks are government expenditures." By the time this amendment is intended to become law in the year 2002, interest on our debt will be $344 billion. Larger than every other category in the budget except Social Security. That's just interest on the debt. If we do nothing, our inability to control the growth of debt and the cost of carrying that debt will tie our hands, preventing us from shifting resources to meet changing needs, which is the essence, in my view, of responsible budgeting, responsible government. So, Mr. President, the question before us today and for the future weeks is not the simple one, are you for balancing the budget or not? Under most circumstances, everyone would agree that we should balance our books. No, it seems to me, Mr. President, the question is, does our repeated failure to balance the budget necessitate a response that all of us agrees is extraordinary, and that is amending the Constitution? The opponents of this amendment may agree that it will drastically change our government, but they will argue for the worse. I expect they will describe the pain that deep cuts will cause to the American people, the elderly, the poor, the military, the farmers, and the rest who depend on government, and paint a bleak picture of life under a balanced budget regime. The hard work of cutting must still be done, and it should be done by us. I mean, evidence the fact that everybody acknowledges that the President's budget package reduced the deficit. Yet everyone went out last year and ran on this gigantic tax increase. It increased it only for the very wealthy. Middle-class taxpayers paid no more. They, in fact, got reductions in some cases, and those were lower middle-class income taxpayers with children, they got an actual reduction in their taxes. But yet, this horrible thing we did, which touched the top 1% of all the taxpayers in America in any meaningful way, that was so horrible and so bad, even though, by the way, in that same document the President said, and we voted, that we would freeze spending. We'd freeze spending in all these other categories. The other side couldn't even muster up the courage to give one single solitary vote for that, reducing the budget deficit by $500 billion. But it seems to me that we should tell the American people. I look at the polls out there. For example, I want to go on record. I'm up for re-election this year, and I'm going to remind everybody what I did at home, which is going to cost me politically. When I argued that we should freeze federal spending, I meant Social Security as well. I meant Medicare and Medicaid. I meant veterans benefits. I meant every single solitary thing in the government. And I not only tried it once, I tried it twice, I tried it a third time, and I tried it a fourth time. Somebody has to tell me in here how we're going to do this hard work.
Wait a minute. Who are you?
I'm Dr. Joe Biden's husband, and I ate Jenny's ice cream, chocolate chip. I came down because I heard there was chocolate chip ice cream. By the way, I have a whole refrigerator full upstairs. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. Folks, welcome to the White House. It's a delight to have you all here. And who are those good-looking kids back there? They're your kids, all four of them? Well, stand up, guys.